Thank you all for joining us. My name is Adina Vogel-Ayalon, and I'm J Street's Vice President and Chief of Staff. Just a quick technical note to make sure that you are all already probably oriented with Zoom, but to feel free to pose questions in the Q&A feature throughout this conversation. It will be recorded and available to rewatch on our YouTube channel. And we encourage you, of course, to share this call with all of your networks. The focus of our conversation today is Israeli voices calling to end the war. And I was just saying to our panelists that I will introduce in a moment that J Street has been focused for quite some time on amplifying American Jewish communal leaders and the voices also of our leaders in Congress to call for an end to the war, to call to release all of the hostages, and to surge aid to Gaza. And we saw this week a specific shift that took place, I think also a tangible shift that took place in the discussion around the war within the American Jewish community and also within Washington and also around the world. Stronger voices speaking out about the reality on the ground in Gaza, several American Jewish organizations and leaders issuing statements about the ongoing starvation in Gaza. And here, as an American Jewish diaspora community, we have also been pointing to the voices in Israel, and that's the real focus of this call. The fact that there's over 70% of the Israeli public that want to reach a ceasefire agreement that ends the war and returns all of the hostages. And in addition to that, we've also seen a shift in Israel that's been taking place where in mainstream media, reports about the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza have actually started to break through on some of these mainstream media stations that did not actually highlight the reality on the ground in Gaza. And we've seen more and more Israeli protesters in the streets carrying signs of ending the war, drawing attention to the starving Palestinian children in Gaza. We will talk a little bit more with our panelists about what they are seeing on the ground in Israel, but I did want to note that, of course, all of us within the J Street community, while our eyes are very much focused on what is happening in Gaza and the need to end the war and return the hostages and surge aid, I also do want to note that we are also very closely following the uptick in violence or the regular and ongoing uptick in violence in the West Bank, settler violence attacks. Just yesterday, Auda Hathalin of the community of Khir in the South Hebron Hills was killed by a settler that was actually sanctioned by the Biden administration under the executive order, and he still is sanctioned by other international partners, but Trump lifted those sanctions when he came into office. And so we are seeing the very real impact of the violence that is ongoing, of course, in the West Bank. And I just wanted to note that as well. I want to introduce our panelists and start asking them questions so you can hear most importantly from them. We have with us Alana Zeitchik, who is an Israeli-American hostage advocate, writer, and the executive director of the Narrow Bridge Project. She is based in Brooklyn, New York. Her cousin's husband, David Cunio, and his brother, Ariel Cunio, remain hostage in Gaza, and she has been vocal since October 7th in her public opposition or in her call for the release of hostages, which then later evolved into an opposition to how the Israeli government has handled this and had failed to prioritize their release. So Alana, thank you so much for being here with us for this call. We also have with us Max Kresh, who is a combat soldier who made a courageous decision to refuse to return to duty in Netanyahu's war in Gaza, and he leads a movement of soldiers for the hostages, a growing wave of soldiers and reservists that are saying enough, and we need to end this war. And many people in our J Street community are probably also familiar with Shir Nosatzki, who is with us. She is a peace advocate and also the director of Have You Seen the Horizon Lately, an Israeli initiative seeking to promote Jewish-Arab political partnership. She's really been at the forefront of mass mobilizations, calling now for an end to the war, release of the hostages, and then also very notably the recognition of the humanity and suffering of Palestinians in Gaza right now. So we are so lucky to have all three of you here, bravely speaking out in your own ways constantly, but also sharing with us your perspective and your advocacy to our entire community. So I'm going to ask each of you a question to tell us a little bit more about yourselves, how you found yourselves to be a part of this movement of Israelis calling for an end to the war. And I'm going to start with you, Alana, and hoping that you can give us a little bit more about your family's story since October 7th, and how, what is the current situation for your loved ones and the role that hostage families are playing in advocacy to end the war.
Yeah, so 6 people in my family were taken hostage on October 7th. That includes my cousin Sharon Aloni Cunio, her husband David Cunio, their 3-year-old twin girls, Emma and Yuli, as well as my other cousin, who is Sharon's sister. Her name is Danielle Aloni, and her 5.5-year-old daughter, Emilia. So all 6 of them were taken together, as well as David's brother Ariel and his girlfriend Arbel, along with many other people from Kibbutz Nir Oz. So I became their advocate here in the US very quickly. And from the very beginning, I was very clear in my own mind that diplomacy is what I knew would bring them back. I think on October 13th at the UN of 2023, I spoke and I said, we don't want any more war. We don't want any more bombs and rockets and blood and tears. We want our family back. And that remains the case for hostage families. I always, from the beginning, made it really clear that um, the hostages should be the priority. And that has always been my message since the beginning. The number one priority should be the hostages. And eventually, as we kept pushing, we got that first deal at the end of November 2023, and David was left behind. So Sharon describes that moment as one of the hardest in her whole experience, having to leave him back there in Hamas captivity. She knows what he's going through. And when they came back, we really thought, okay, this was December of that year. We thought, okay, in the new year, like he'll come home soon. It can't go on for that much longer. And by March of last year, it became very clear that the hostages were not the priority. And I always knew that there was an additional priority of eliminating Hamas and whatever that means to the government, right? We all have our different views on what that means. But by March of last year, and I think that was in line with the Israeli public on the whole, the protests really like came back in full force. I publicly announced my support for it. I wrote an op-ed in the Forward about it, describing that I was afraid that David would never come home, if not, for this government. And I have continued to be a really vocal voice. And the hostage families, everyone has their own journey. Some people were scared to speak up in the beginning, and now so many people, like, Sylvia, David and Ariel's mother, she's the most apolitical person you could ever imagine. She's a heart of gold. She's just a sweet mother, and she was afraid. She didn't know, and now she's out there, protesting and raising her voice and holding this government accountable. And the government has not been there for my family. They have not met with us. They have not taking care of us. They know they can't meet with us. They can't see us and speak to us eye to eye.
Thank you for sharing that. And of course, it's also incredibly painful to hear your story. And I appreciate, the work that you're doing and the fact that you've noted specifically, right, people that were never thought, of course, they would be in this position to take a very strong political advocacy role are now, thrust into that spotlight, needing to do anything possible, right, to call for pressure on the government to do everything that they can to release their loved ones. I want to also turn now to Max for you to share a little bit about yourself. And of course, obviously, you were kind of thrust into a situation. Can you tell us a little bit more about, going to war in Gaza and then how you made the decision, I imagine also a difficult decision to refuse to return. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself, Max.
So hi. First of all, thank you for having me, and thanks for putting together this webinar. Just a quick correction. I didn't serve in Gaza. I served in the I was a combat soldier. I served in the northern border with Lebanon. Um, and to answer the broader question, I guess my journey with activism really started well before this war, but also my journey in using my my place as a soldier um, as it relates to my activism. also started before the war. And during the judicial reform, I'm sure people here remember, um, a lot of things have happened since then. Um, During that time, there were big calls for rallying for refusal during that time. It was very clear to everybody that this government was leading us towards a catastrophe. Um, and I was very much on the fence. I didn't know what was the right thing to do. On the one hand, I thought that it was important to remove this government at all costs. On the other hand, I felt that in 7 years that I had been doing reserves, I came to the conclusion that the reason that I kept going was to be a voice of reason on the ground. I also to be a voice of reason and also to be able to witness what's happening there. And as long as I could continue to be a voice of reason on the ground, I determined that I would continue to go. So I was very conflicted before the war also. When the war broke out, there was no question for me whether I would show up. There was an immediate, serious, real threat. Terrorists broke in, massacred over a thousand Israelis. I have friends who this is my first time meeting Alana, but I have friends who unfortunately there's so many families who have been really wrecked because of this war. Um, so there was really no question about it whether I would be showing up. But right off the bat, I was very vocal about um, that we should not be losing sight of what's really important here. Not to let the racism coming out of the government dictate how we operate and how we act during this war. And it was very clear to me from the beginning that that's what was happening. So I found myself in a very difficult place of how do I continue to be here, knowing that on the one hand, we do have a real threat, and on the other hand, this war is not preventing this real threat. So I really found myself stuck in this kind of like between a rock and a hard place. Um, and that was the situation with a lot of soldiers who also progressive values, not messianic religious Zionist, whatever. Like it's people who really gave their lives and dedicated large parts of their lives to defending the country. And now we found ourselves being hijacked with our military being hijacked by a radical government. Um, and fighting in possibly the most important war of our lives with a totally reckless leadership. Um, so I came back from the war pretty destroyed, especially after Alana mentioned the first hostage deal. I watched that deal start and end, and that was something that really crushed me, knowing that there's just a number that's too high for this government, and it's not an unreasonable number that's too high for this government in terms of a price that needs to be paid in order to end this war and bring home our hostages. And that was something that I came home crushed from. And it took me a very long time to express openly my refusal to go back. Um, it actually took until I think it was the end of August or beginning of September when Hirsch and the six hostages that were killed in the tunnels. And that was really adjacent to a deal that was supposed to happen. And we had ministers in our government who were saying, absolutely not. If you do this deal, we're gonna topple the government. After that happened, I sent a text message to my commander. I said, listen, um, I'm not coming back. Know that you're down. I didn't mention I'm a medic. I'm a combat medic in the Army. I told him, listen, know that you're down a medic. I hope you come back safe, but I cannot continue in this anymore. There's no legitimacy here. Um, that's how that's how it started. And at that point, I kind of realized, okay, I'm out now. Like I'm out of there. I don't really have a community that I can talk to about this, that I can share these feelings with. Um, but that was also a big breaking point for a lot of other soldiers as well. Um, and I had joined up with some other soldiers who started putting together this letter. And it was an open letter. We had signed it with 130 signatories, 130 soldiers who served during the war. And beyond just making a very and basically stating that we're going to refuse to serve until there's a hostage deal that actually is completed. Um, Aside from making a huge splash in the media and making very big impact, we realized that it served as a community for us when we didn't have people that we could share. And a lot of us were just very afraid to vocalize what we've been feeling up until then. So having this platform has allowed us to also express these things that we hadn't been feeling able to express before. Um, I won't take up too much more time on the introduction.
I'll come
Thank you.
back to you, but I appreciate you, I appreciate you sharing all of that and also noting that like really pivotal moment with the beautiful six, right? The six hostages that were killed in August. And I note that specifically because that was a time, you noting that connects to also a serious divergence that I saw happening between the American Jewish community and Israel, the Israeli public, right? The Israeli public was out in the streets, right? They were distraught, calling for a deal. And here in the American Jewish community, there were voices that were calling for a deal, but there were many still within the organized Jewish community that were not willing to echo that sentiment that was out in the streets in Israel. And I think that is the importance of this call, I think, and the importance of what J Street is continuing to try to do is to say that these calls are actually being screamed loudly from the Israeli public, and we need to hear them, and we need to see this type of action being internalized within the American Jewish community, who is afraid, many are afraid to speak out for fear that will be perceived as anti-Israel, rather than seeing their allies, their ideological allies and partners and friends and families on the ground speaking out. So Shir, I want to turn to you now and ask about your advocacy journey. You obviously played an incredible role in organizing protests pre-October 7th around the judicial overhaul. And then, of course, post-October 7th in terms of rallying cries for the hostages. And now you have also been focusing on the rallies that have been focused on drawing attention to the reality in Gaza and bringing out Israelis to the streets. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about that journey in your advocacy and why opposing the war now is really so central to your mission and the mission of your organization.
Okay, so first, thank you, Adina, and it's really, really good to be here, especially these days. It's crucial for us, even Israelis, to meet so many partners and allies, as you call it. I see there's almost 500 people on that call, and it's really moving and important. Regarding your question, very similar like Max, I was an activist before October 7, and I was a peace activist, and I was also, as you mentioned, very much involved as part of the organizers in the protest against the judicial coup. But when October 7 came, like everyone, everything stopped. There was the day of October 6, and there was everything that came after October 7. And the first thing I did, like all of my activist partners, was almost a non-political work. We went to do emergency work. We went to volunteer. I founded an emergency relief center in the South. And many of my friends just went to do that, to try to save lives, helped one another. It felt like all the politics that was before is for a moment maybe irrelevant, that we are in a survival war. And that was an amazing to see the public is at. And I can tell you that also personally, as a peace activist and as one that was extremely against this current government and thought that it doesn't have any legitimation, I still thought that we don't have a choice but to get in to Gaza, especially when we have the hostages there, and that there was still a threat on Israel back then on October. So there was, I would assume back then, if you would do on October 23 a poll among Israelis, how many supports getting inside of Gaza, starting the war or continuing it, depends how you define it. I would assume that you would see more than 90% support among Israelis, and I was one of them. And a few weeks after the war began, when I started to understand that the priorities of the government is not the hostages, and B, that there are so many in the right wing that extreme right wing, that tried to use this terrible tragedy while we were working in emergency relief centers across the country. They were already campaigning, political campaigning. And I think one of the reasons why I was not in a very political mood post October 7 is that maybe I had a very naive assumption that the conception that have collapsed on October 7 was the extreme right wing. And that the obvious conclusion out of it will be that we have to try another way, that trying to maintain the conflict and the ongoing occupation, that's not the way for security, that we have to try the political path. And when it starts to lechalchel, how do I say lechalchel? When I started to see and to understand that there are people working in creating the public consciousness, is that the conclusion of October 7 is more war, more violence, more occupation, and that there is not even one convincing, compelling, powerful public voice that's saying something else. I understood that the critical battle is not in the emergency and relief centers, not anymore. And when I started to speak with so many of my friends and colleagues from the protest against the judicial coup that were taking avocados out of trees in the south because that's what they thought it's like, it's the crucial fight. And they were so afraid of saying anything that is political, anything that is controversial. I understood that this is the most crucial fight we have. And unfortunately, at 23, there was very few that were even able to say that something that was considered so radical back then, end the war. Let's try the political way. And even when we talk in 23, even when we talked about hostage deal, it was hostage deal without talking about the fact that it's meaning ending the war, the fact that it means ceasefire, even that people understand that it was so radical to say it. And 2 years later, we are not in the same situation. And especially in the last few weeks. And you started by saying, Adina, that 70% of Israelis supports ending the war. That wasn't the case in the past. Actually, in 23, there was nobody's asking that question like that. And the concept of ending the war was normalized. and it has a huge public support when it's asking polls. But I want to say, I want to add one last thing to it, and I know that we will talk about Gaza, but before we talk about Gaza, and I know you're going to ask about it, I want to say something that will maybe explain the way that the situation that Israelis are at in the last 2 years. It's all of the things that we see are happening always in societies of trauma and war, okay? But there is an additional component that is happening now in Israel that is not usually the situation in moments like this. I think it's the biggest gap in the history of Israel between what is the interest of the state of Israel and the Israeli public, and what is the interest of the government, the decision makers. It's an unbelievable, tremendous gap that we have never experienced before. When you combine that to the fact that Israelis in wartime has the tendency, the ethos, to support their leadership, to support not only political leadership, but also army leadership. And this is a very, very basic community response. So we have to have the basic belief that they're doing what they think is right, because it's life or death. It's our basic existence of our kids. So if you combine this and this terrible gap of interests, you can understand the confusion of the Israeli public and the fact that we are, in many ways, are frozen.
Thank you, Shir, for outlining that so clearly. And I think, J Street has always been trying to make the case. Why do we call ourselves a pro-Israel organization when we are so oppositional to the policies of this Israeli government? Is because we believe that what we are working towards is actually in the interest of the state of Israel and the Israeli people, and that is not what this government is actually pursuing. And so 100% agree with that, very clear understanding that it is clear that this government is doing what it's in its own interest and its own political interest, and not, of course, what we here on this call believe is in the interest of the long-term well-being of Israelis and of course also of Palestinians in the region. Alana, I want to come back to you, and we've been talking about this shift that's taken place, right? The shift that you all went through, or the shift that's taking place within the Israeli society. Alana, you straddle both the Israeli and American communities, and I would love for you to talk a little bit about how you've seen things shift from your perspective in the conversations with Israelis from within the hostage family community, and also within the American Jewish community that you're a part of, and how has that changed or impacted your advocacy work?
Yeah, it's complicated balancing between these two things. I speak to the people I reach are a pretty wide range of people, but it's still primarily a very Jewish audience that I connect with in general. And a lot of them are American Jews. And, it was in December, I'll say for me, when things started to shift, especially, was December when some hostages were killed by the IDF. And my reaction was horror. And the Jewish community here in America, right? Israelis also, but the Jewish community in America was a little bit sort of it wasn't the same visceral urgency and reaction that I had. And as I was witnessing what was unfolding in the politics in Israel, as I was seeing, my cousin have to cry in meetings with government officials while they sort of overlook the urgency of her pain, right? A returned hostage. And people in America weren't seeing this. So I want to address the fact there is a major cultural and language barrier in between the American Jewish community and the Israeli community that makes a lot of what I think I was starting to see happen on the Israeli side really hard to like make its way to the American Jews. So naturally, like my perspective and my approach to advocacy started to change a lot quicker. I started to become a bit frustrated with the American kind of hostage advocacy is very bipartisan, which is fine. That I support, but the language was not as severe as I needed. I needed more. I needed major accountability, which I was only finding amongst Israelis. Israelis were the ones who were able to really hold the government accountable, and really point to them. And the protest movement for me was so necessary for me to be able to advocate in that way here in America. I do think like I have found it really important to pay attention to what's happening in Israel, to pay attention to what my family was saying and what they were experiencing before I would decide how to react here, because it was important for me to feel like I was locked in step with the Israeli public and feeling like we were, you know, part of a community. But here it really hasn't evolved that much. I have tried really, really hard to get the American Jewish community, and not just like, not the family forum. They're going to do what they're going to do. There's just a public policy advocacy, which needs to kind of balance things out pretty evenly. But you know, you have a lot of really loud right-wing voices in America who I would say overshadow some of the voices like myself and even other hostage family members who are holding the Israeli government accountable, who reject the notion of a deal, reject the notion of diplomacy, of a ceasefire, who reject the notion that Palestinians are suffering at all, or suffering enough in a way that, you know, would require us to perhaps do something differently. And, you know, I'm a proponent of diplomacy. I think that peace is not like it's not like a kumbaya thing where we sit in a circle and hold hands. It's a peace agreement. It's an agreement between nations, between political leaders. So we have to advocate for that. And it's become increasingly difficult for me. You know, you mentioned earlier community, and I stopped feeling I feel a great sense of gratitude to the Jewish community on the whole, because I would have been really totally alone in all this without the American Jewish community. And they still, for the most part, are with me. But I really was not able to be in pro-Israel spaces. These were not spaces that were holding the government accountable. They didn't feel the same rage and urgency that I feel that my family feels against this government, who I believe is a threat to Israeli security now and for a very long time. Like, I believe that it is an existential threat to the state of Israel, and not just to Palestinians, like very much to us. And I stopped being able to attend I was not really, I don't love rallies to begin with, but the first time I finally felt in community was in July of last year. I was in Washington protesting Netanyahu when he came to speak to Congress. And I was there to meet with, you know, lawmakers as well. And the group Unacceptable, who is a pro-democracy kind of like extension of the judicial reform movement, or protest movement based in San Francisco, they created a protest in DC. And it was the first time I saw the Israeli flag alongside a protest of Netanyahu here in America. And I started crying hysterically because it was so overwhelming for me to finally feel like the flag made sense in that context. It didn't make sense in the other ways I was seeing it, which felt very American. And I needed to be in that space. And so I have continued to try to bring that version of community to the way that I advocate. And I feel that American Jews, I really understand what you're all going through. I am one. I'm an American Jew, and we are facing a crisis here in America. But we do need to have courage, and there needs to be courage on behalf of the hostages, on behalf of the state of Israel. And that is going to mean that we have to say things that some people are going to use against us. We really can't we can't control it. We have each other. And so I'm always really trying to encourage people to listen to Israelis. The majority of Israelis, not just like super left-wing Israelis, not just anti-occupation Israelis, the majority of Israelis are holding this government accountable, and we are their partners. We are not the government's partners. We are their partners. So I really I really hope that, the time is long gone, but it's never too late, is what I mean. It's never too late. They didn't do it before, but we can do it now. And me and all of the other hostage families will be with you in that.
Thank you so much, Alana. So many points that you made, I think, so strongly resonate with every single person on this call, and about the need for community of people that are standing together and understanding that what it means to support Israel is being able to stand with the Israeli people, and we can also be incredibly vocal in our criticism of the policies that are threatening our people, and of course, what you noted, which is the strategic interest, not a kumbaya interest of peace, right, and stability. And I wanted to just note specifically for all of our viewers, for you, that we are holding a community rallying call on Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern, which is going to be bringing together leaders of Jewish communal organizations that are speaking out now and that are trying to very much work to create that community in that space for American Jews who want to call for a different approach, right, from our community and of course from this government, to call to end the war and release the hostages and surge aid to Gaza. Max, I'm going to turn to you now because there's a few questions in the Q&A about the consequences of taking a position like you have taken, and deciding not to return to duty. And of course, as many of your peers have decided not to return to serve in Gaza. Is it similar to people who are, draft refusers, so to speak? And so that's one piece of the question, but also if you can talk about how that's been perceived among your network and social circles and how you are trying to work and draw attention to your position and to your vision, and why you are taking the very brave position that you are taking right now.
Wow. Okay, so there's a lot to a lot to unpack there. Um, there were a couple points that I wanted to just note about what Alana said that I really resonated deeply. For one, just about the fear of speaking out and the difficulty of speaking out, certainly towards the beginning of the war, and still today. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so powerful to have this call. um, also with the difference that you mentioned, Adina, about the American versus the Israeli perceptions, um, where I think that it's so clear and so important to recognize also and work on that, the fact that we strengthen each other. When we speak out, we give each other strength to be able to speak out, and we create more space to be able to speak out. That's something that we've experienced as soldiers speaking out, as soldiers refusing, as soldiers publicly refusing. And that's something that we've also seen throughout this movement and this whole struggle of trying to end this war and get our hostages back. Which again, you noted it so well of this uh, different, or this divide between the needs of the Israeli people and the needs of the government. Um, Actually, I think that was Shir that noted that. Um, but that's really so much the case, and a big part of it is because people are just afraid to speak out. Um, what I wanted to, I'll jump um, to what you asked me specifically. There's so much to so much to go off on tangents here, but I'll try to avoid doing that. Um, so as far as consequences, the consequences officially are able to be quite severe. In practice, they've not been extremely severe anyway. At least not the official consequences. That being jail time, that being fines, that being reprimands, like military punishments. That being said, social consequences are huge, enormous. I guess I would say that there's a social consequences in a big way, and I'm not trying to steal valor in any way, ironically. But I kind of say that it's similar to coming out of the closet because you're holding something in for so long that you can't speak about. And then when you do speak about it, you're going up against really like against the world, against everybody that you know, that you associated with. You kind of you have this built-in assumption that everybody is going to, at best disapprove and at worst harass or be violent against you, which is certainly something that it hasn't been common, violence against refusers, but we've gotten tons. I mean, everybody who's publicly refused has been harassed, and I'm sure this is not, this was the case also before I was refusing as a soldier, and I'm sure that Shir can attest to that as an activist. And probably Alana also. I know that unfortunately, um, even the families have been very targeted. Um, I will also note that that's one of the reasons why, first of all, it's a two-way road, but first of all, we have been, as soldiers for the hostages, we've been very hesitant to make to form, in a sense, alliances with family members, um, because we don't want to draw extra fire on them. And also, that's been something that has been difficult for a lot of family members have expressed to us that they want to be able to they want to be able to support us, but they're also afraid to because same reason. Um, so that's been one of just that kind of that built-in mechanism of like holding yourself back, not being able to speak out, um, has really been significant in all of this. But then going back again to the when we speak out, we strengthen others, and when others speak out, they strengthen us, and we create more space, more and more space to be able to say these things. And all it takes is one person kind of breaking the ice, and then other people are able to join in. Um, I, I say it a lot, like I, I think a lot of me and a lot of the people I never expected that I would be in the place that I'm in. I never wanted to be in the place that I'm in. I never wanted to be having to refuse to serve. And a lot of my, I would say, certainly the proudest thing that I've done was in the framework of my reserve service. When during Corona, as a medic, I was able to help with the campaign of administering vaccines. During that time, in uniform, I gave almost a thousand vaccines, and that's something that, again, like I never imagined that I would be put in such a situation of such blatant violation of my values and the values that I enlisted to maintain. Um, but that's kind of that's where we found ourselves. And help me out if I missed something.
No, I want to pick up on something that you said and also tie it to some questions where people are asking, what can we do now? And I want to point to the fact that all three of you represent bravery that I hope everyone in this call really can internalize, because As you said, it is not easy. It has not been easy post October 7th to go against the grain in Israel. But Max, you had noted so beautifully that, it just takes one voice, and that voice can strengthen others, and it opens up space. And I want to say that your voices, right? And but the big purpose of us wanting to bring this call together is because your voices have an impact here. And what we at J Street are trying to do right now is to call on, right, whether that's our elected officials to raise their voices and put pressure, and whether that's the American Jewish community to actually articulate and raise their voices and put pressure. And we have seen just in the last week what happens when voices get louder and louder, and you are not afraid to raise your voice and to stand with others and speak critically. We've seen a shift in Israeli policy vis-a-vis humanitarian aid in Gaza. I'm not going to say that that is going to be, that is enough, but you have seen what it can do to take action now, right? Every single person on this call, whether that's contacting your member of Congress, or that's contacting a organizational leader, a member of clergy, asking people to speak out. The more voices are out there together, the more that we can see a change, and definitely to point to the voices of these three brave individuals on this call. So thank you so much for saying that, Max. I want to shift to Shir, if that's
Is
okay.
it all right if I just add one more point?
Please.
Because you kind of touching on some of the things that you mentioned is you also asked about how this is perceived versus typical refusers, like 18-year-old draft refusers. And with all of the I mean no disrespect to 18-year-old draft refusers, very brave in what they're doing. It's very different. Obviously, like we're people who served a full service and we've served in reserves. So we have a standing among the Israeli society as well that's extremely highly regarded. Whereas draft refusers, off the bat, they're dismissed by the vast majority of Israeli society. And that's something that I see it gives a lot of cognitive dissonance for a lot of people who, even on the right, like even on the far right, when they see us who have served during this war, many of us in combat scenarios who have seen combat, now speaking out against the war, it does like a brain fry of does not compute. How do I make sense of this situation? Which I see as a very big success for us, and it's something that we having that voice as soldiers and as this segment of society that's usually held in very high regard, we have this ability to, in a big way, shift public narrative that a lot of other groups don't necessarily have. So that was I'll stop talking now.
Important point to add. And Shir, I'm going to ask you a question, then I'm going to turn to all three of you again for a final question. But Shir, we're a lot of questions about the reality on the ground right now in Gaza. And how terrible it is, and of course the fact that the Israeli government continues to say this is all Hamas propaganda. The more that you amplify this, you are amplifying Hamas propaganda. There is no starvation. There is no issue that Gazans are well fed. They have food. It's all the UN that is not delivering that food. And so I know that that's something, of course, that we have to contend with and to continue to shed light to the reality on the ground, and to say that it is totally legitimate, of course, to draw attention to starvation in Gaza, and that does not mean that you are amplifying Hamas propaganda. But how are you dealing with that, Shir, as an Israeli, and in terms of the protests that you're organizing, and how are you pushing back against that narrative from the Israeli government and some of the most extreme and horrifying rhetoric coming out of this government, calling to wipe out Gaza, to ethnically cleanse the Strip, right, to force family to be relocated? How do you contend with all of that in Israel right now?
Well, it's very, very difficult times, and what's happening in Gaza, it's devastating, and it's devastating to be, I'm sure it's devastating to be Jewish outside of Israel, maybe feeling helpful, but I can tell you it's very hard to be Jewish and Israeli, and these things happen under your name and under your government and under your taxes, and to not to be helpful about that, but to not be able to stop that, as fast as it should be stopped. But I do want to tell you that we started to talk before about things that have changed, and I can tell you that the last few weeks we see tremendous change in public narrative, and I want to give you just two personal examples. One is that 2 months ago, we have created, the NGO I'm running, have you seen the Horizon lately? We have created a video about the catastrophe in Gaza. And we understood we can't even show any horrific. So we just showed for each child that have died, we showed a unicorn in AI, just that people will understand the size of the tragedy. And we launched it, and it reached more than 100,000 views, but we weren't able to put it on any official media outlet. We wanted people to see that, because they don't get to see any of those images and knowledge on a traditional media in Israel. Just don't show them what is happening in Gaza. So we said, okay, we'll pay for ads so people will see. And the situation 2 months ago in Israel were that there was not even one media outlet in Israel that is not the Haaretz, that has very minor reading circles. There was not even one that was willing to get our money to publish it as a commercial. You know, they didn't have to put it on their own. And just 2 days ago, we got from N12, which is the leading news outlet in Israel, saying, if you're still interested, here's an offer. And that's something 2 months ago, we begged them to put it out there. So that's something that I can tell you personally, that it showed me how the narrative have shifted. And the second is that last week, for the first time ever, we were part of the organizers of a protest, a mainstream protest, that is calling to end the war. The first time since October 7, it was in a Bima Center, 20,000, almost 30,000 participating in it. And there was families of the hostages who took part in it, families of soldiers that now in Gaza. All of them came together, and even Ninette Tayeb, which is one of the most famous and popular singers in Israel, all came for the first time for a rally that its main message was end the war. So it's not fast enough, and it's not big enough, but we see a change in narrative in the last few weeks, and it's because of the work that it's being done on the ground in Israel, but also because of the voices being echoed across the world, especially voices of friends and brothers and sisters that are not perceived as our enemies, and anti-Semitism as pro-Palestinian more than pro-Israeli. So those voices are critical, even if we don't see the immediate change they bring. Like Leonard Cohen said, there is crack in everything and the light comes through it. But I want to add, I know we're running out of time, but to answer the question you asked about how do we deal with those terrible sayings that are coming out of our government. And I can tell you there is only one answer to that, Adina: elections. That's the only answer. We are already in election year. There is maximum of a year until the next election, and we need to win it. We need to send them home. There is no any other way to change that. That's the only answer. And the optimistic angle is that since October 7, or actually since the judicial coup, almost the last 3 years, they don't have a majority, not even in one poll. So what we need to be focusing on is to make sure that when election come, they will be free elections and that we will win it.
Amen. Okay, so the last question, I know we don't have, we have about 5 minutes left, and my last question that I want to pose to each one of you, and Alana, I'm going to start with you. What would you like to see from our community, from the American Jewish community, and also from the American community that's not Jewish, but of course supports you? How can we support you? And I will go just Alana, and then Max and Shir, and then I'm sorry, I wish we had more time. Alana, please.
So you talked about using your voice. Please use your voice wherever you can. It might be small, it might be to a person on the street, it might be to someone you know that's in a Jewish organization. Like it doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be a big show. Just use your voice, and when you do, focus on your advocacy for a deal that ends the war and returns all of the hostages. We are seeing, and people should be speaking up about the starvation in Gaza. Like it is an immediate concern that has to be fixed right now. The hostages are also being starved, right? They are also being starved by Hamas right now, and we cannot remove the hostages from the conversation. And I see it happening, and I'm personally very stressed about it. Not because I want people in Gaza to live. Very much so. And I want them to eat. I also want David to come home right now. I want all of them to come home. So please keep speaking up. Use your power wherever you have it. Use it, and make sure you're including the hostages in everything that you are talking about, because we can't let them be forgotten.
Thank you, Alana. Max.
All right, so I'll try to be quick about it. I would say reclaim your Zionism. And just to explain that, Alana mentioned before about going to a rally, and it was the first time that she saw an Israeli flag, and it was something that was very exciting and meaningful. And that was something that for a while at the protests in Israel, I felt very conflicted about, because the flag had kind of come to mean something else. I found myself early on in the war that I didn't feel like I could be proud of sharing a picture of myself in uniform. And that was for an event that my high school had wanted to do. And I remember that somebody that I went to school with, who's very far right, a supporter of Ben Gvir and small, like the very extremists. She said, "I hate that these protests have stolen the flag from us." Um, and that's what I think we really need to do. Is this flag is a symbol. It's like Zionism itself is a symbol, and it's something that I would say the fascist right has hijacked, and it's time to reclaim that, to make that an obsolete tool for them and use it for us. Zionism means ending the occupation. Zionism means ending the war. It means bringing home our hostages now. It means having accountability in our government. It means having a state that we can be proud of. So that's what I would say is reclaim your Zionism and make it clear that that's what that means.
Thank you so much, Max. Shir. Oh, wait, unmute so we can hear your words.
So I'm signing each word Alana and Max have said, and I want to add two small things to it. Tell people around the world that doesn't know us Israelis as you do, that there are many people in Israel that are not agreeing with our government, is not agreeing with what's happening now, and not only not agreeing, but fighting on the ground to change it. It's important that they know that what they see in the news, it's not all Israelis, and that there is a different Israel, and we need you to echo it. And the second thing I ended before with the elections. So when election comes, whoever you know that Israeli always have voting rights in Israel, get a flight and come here. We need every vote.
I want to thank you each one of you for being with us, for sharing your insight, your wisdom, and just for everything that you do, for your courage and for your advocacy and your bravery just every single day. And thank you to everyone who joined us. I know there's a lot more to unpack, of course, and we will be trying to meet all of those needs, how to debunk the myths that are coming out, of course, from the right-wing talking points and the Israeli government talking points, how to really talk about the reality of the ground, on the ground in the situation in Gaza. There was so much that we couldn't touch on, but this call really did draw attention to your voices, to the Israeli voices that are calling to end the war, to release the hostages and surge aid to Gaza, and to see the humanity of both Israelis and Palestinians together. And thank you so much. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to our speakers again. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.